Chris with Azrael's Pit Barbecue, and if you are on our Facebook page, you see we put a lot of pictures up, and I've actually gotten some messages from friends of mine, as well as strangers actually, who have seen our pictures and said, hey, you ever thought about making some videos on some of the stuff you cook? I thought about that. You know, there's tons of videos out on YouTube about how to do this and how to do that, so I didn't really feel like I had anything to add. All that information is out there. A lot of the information that I've used to kind of step up my barbecue cooking and whatnot has come from AmazingRibs.com and a lot of YouTube research. But that said, without getting into a how-to video, how about a, hey, this is what we're doing video. So happen to be doing a relatively simple cook today and thought this would be a good opportunity to test the waters a little bit and see how this goes. So today we're going to do a video and we are cooking beef back ribs. Beef back ribs are really cool. A lot of people aren't familiar with beef back ribs. You know, you hear more about short ribs than the beef back ribs, but when you can get them and cooked properly, they're really, really good. So a little bit about the beef back rib. Essentially, this is where the ribeye cuts would come from. And when they're doing like boneless ribeyes or whatnot, they'll cut the meat as close as they can here. So there's not a lot of meat on top of these, similar to baby back ribs if you were dealing with pork. However, all this meat in between, this is basically, you know, ribeye meat, you know, that type of quality meat. It's really, really good. You can see there's nice little fat marbling on this. Lots of great flavor, fun to eat. And in our store, these we got at Publix, and they tend to come in cuts about yay big. Now, one of the deceiving things about beef back ribs that I have found is because it looks like there's so little meat on them, I have tended in the past to buy a lot and cook them, and then you don't realize these things are really filling. There's actually quite a bit of meat between the bones, and so it's this goodness we're really looking for. So another thing about beef back ribs that I like is they're not as prep intensive. If I was doing pork ribs, I would be doing a whole lot of trim out. I would be removing this membrane on the back, all that kind of stuff. Well, with beef back ribs, I don't really do that. This fat and marbling, I want to leave that there. I want that flavor and I want that moisture. This membrane that's on the back, I don't remove this membrane. This is kind of holding this all together. If you take this membrane off, unlike the pork ribs, if you take the membrane off the beef ribs and you cook these up to be nice and tender, it's not so much about the bones falling out, but the whole thing will kind of fall apart. This membrane's really holding it together. So when you go to eat them, some of this will cook down a little bit. You can peel the rest off if it ends up being a little bit chewy, but ultimately I leave that on for the cook. Another thing about ribs, that the beef back ribs, is from a rub standpoint, it's very you know, relatively simple rub. This is a rub I don't typically have just made up and ready to go. I make it on the spot for when I'm going to do when I'm cooking these. So I'm going to do that right now. I got some salt, garlic powder, a little bit of paprika, some onion powder, black pepper, of course, a little bit of mild chili powder. I'm going to put a touch of ancho in there and a little bit of sugar. You don't want a lot of sugar with your beef, in my opinion. Sweet beef, really, I don't like that combination. But I do put a little bit of sugar in the rub because it'll get a little bit of a caramelization on top, a little bit, and give you kind of, it's more of a coloring thing as opposed to a flavoring thing. So let's make up this rub real quick. Alright, so I'm going to make up this rub, and I don't really have a recipe for this. This is just kind of I wing it kind of deal, depending on how much I'm making. So that's a tablespoon. I'm going to go maybe a tablespoon and a half. This is going to spread out quite a bit. This is chili powder. Let's start with, say, a tablespoon of that. Black pepper. I'm going to go, say, a tablespoon of that. Like I said, this isn't really a recipe that I go by the numbers. This particular one, I just kind of wing it and see how I do this one pretty much by feel. A little bit of garlic powder. So far I'm tablespoons of everything except the salt. We'll just see how I feel about that. That was paprika. I'm sorry, that was onion powder. This is garlic powder. And this is ancho. This will put a little depth and a little bit of heat. I'm going to go with about a half of that. And let me grab some sugar. Mix these seasonings in with my sugar, so I'm going to grab this. Okay, got some rub made up, got my ribs. Now, here's the thing about beef that I always do. I didn't do on this one, but typically when I'm doing anything with beef, I will do a salt dry brine overnight. I didn't do it on these, didn't have time. This was a little more impromptu. So these have not been salted, so I put salt in the rub. Had I salted these overnight as a dry brine, I would not have put salt in that rub. Again, I don't do a whole lot of trimming out on these things. What I will do is if I see little pockets of fat, and you got to feel it because it's right on the bone. If I see a big glob of fat, I will pull that off because it won't render down as much. But typically I don't do a whole lot of trimming on these. I just let them do their thing. And so, you know, we're going to leave the backs alone. Okay. Just a couple of little globules I wanted to get off there, but otherwise I think we're good. Just leave that there. Alright. Next thing is anything I cook barbecue wise that I'm putting a dry rub on, I always start with an oil. Now you'll hear people talk about using mustard and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it's a binder to hold your seasonings on. But, and this is something I learned from AmazingRubs.com, and I've looked into it further. This is absolutely true. Using mustard as a binder and all that kind of stuff is all fine and well, but mustard is mostly water. So we use oil specifically because most dry seasonings are oil soluble and not water soluble. So by using oil as our first coat and binder, we're giving the seasoning a chance to break down a little bit in the oil and extract a little more flavor out of it. Whenever I do cooks where I'm doing something like a sauce or anything I'm doing in like a Dutch oven or a pot or something, I always start with oil, maybe some onions, that kind of thing, and then my seasonings go in instead of a bunch of water and all that kind of stuff. Let the seasonings get a chance to get extracted and intensify a little bit before you start saturating, you know, watering them down. Now, as you can see, I'm not going crazy here. I've got plenty of rub. One thing about beef, for my taste, I'm kind of this way about barbecue in general. You know, seasonings are there to enhance, but when you've got beef, especially, you know, prime rib type beef, that kind of stuff, you know, you don't want to over season it. Otherwise, you're just eating a bunch of seasoning with some meat texture. I am more inclined to want to taste the beef goodness. Now, I don't get as involved on the back side because of that skin there. The seasoning is really not going to go anywhere, but I will put some seasoning right here on the ends of these rib bones. Catch some of that meat there. If I didn't mention it, this is just straight old vegetable oil. Some people will use olive oil. I say be careful if you're going to use olive oil. You know, vegetable oil is pretty neutral. Olive oils and that kind of stuff can add, you know, a flavor, and you may or may not want that in your flavor profile. So. Catch the ends. I think I made just right amount of rub here. I'm almost out. All right. Perfect. Now, I'm going to wrap these. I'm going to set them in the fridge until they're ready to go in the pit. Let the oil and the seasonings have a chance to mellow out and do their thing. All right, we got the pit hot and running. I'm running just a little over 250 degrees. I want to be cooking 250 or a little lower. I don't really cook it. You hear a lot of people talk about low and slow, 225. I tend to cook between 225 and 250. 250 seems to be the sweet spot for my pit. So she's a little bit over 250 right now. I'm gonna put the cold meat on and let her coast into the cooking temperature. So get those on real quick. All right, so we got the meat on. You see how that looks? That's pretty. Just went on. Got a little bit of smoke in the chamber. This is a nice clean smoke. We'll talk about that in just a second. Alright, so let's take a look at a couple of things real fast. First thing I want you to notice, I'm going to see if I can get a shot here. Take a look at that smokestack. Not sure if it's picking up in the video or not, but what you don't see is just dark plumes of smoke. Running a really clean smoke. We have a live fire in the firebox. No coals. It's a straight wood cook. Can't see it very well from this angle, but no charcoal in there at all. We started with a oak fire to begin with. Some oak splits, that's going to be our heat, and then we're adding a little bit of mesquite on the front end of the cook, specifically for the purpose of getting a little flavor in there, a little bit of a Texas style cook here going. So we're going to let this run about 2.5 hours. We'll come back and check it and see how we're doing. All right, it's been a couple of hours. Let's see what we got. These have really plumped up. Look at that. Look at that. Mahogany color on it. See if we can get in there and take a better shot. That's pretty. Good coloration. They're pretty much taking all the smoke they're going to take. I do a bend test here. This one's bending a little bit. This one's still pretty stiff feeling, a little thicker. And this one's kind of stiff feeling. Alright, Okay, the ribs are looking really good, got a really good color on them, but I think they need to be tenderized a little bit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna braise them just like you would in an oven. Essentially what we're gonna do here, we're gonna wrap them up, put a little bit of a liquid of some type in there to steam out and tenderize this meat up a little bit. We'll start with 30 minutes, come back and check them. Maybe we go to 45, see where we are. So let's do that. Alright, we're going to check these ribs, see how they're looking. They've been in here for about 45 minutes, almost an hour. I can tell. Yeah, they are definitely ready to come out here. We want to save this liquid, so I'm going to put them in this pan down. I'm going to throw them right back on. That's a good pullback on this bone right here. That's a good one. Okay, we're going to let this run about another 30 minutes and we should be ready to go. Alright, we got the ribs pulled off. I think they look really, really good. Got a little drawback on the bone. Looks nice. They smell good. Going to wrap them up and let them rest for just a few minutes while we let some veg get done cooking. And then we'll give these a cut and check on their tenderness. Okay, we got the ribs off the pit. They've been resting. And I think we're ready to give these a cut. I'm going to cut these in one bone sections. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. Oh, that's so nice. Emily, you zoom in on that beautiful smoke ring right there. Nice and moist. Look how tender that is. These are going to be fantastic. So we're going to get these cut up. We're going to have us some dinner. And that's how we do beef back ribs at Azrael's Pit Barbecue. You guys have a great day. Keep the smoke rolling. And we'll talk to you next time.